Resurrecting the Dead for Saturday morning reruns. Here's your look at the brand new NECA toys. Toony Terror's Return of the Living Dead, Tarman. Bring the fun of Saturday morning cartoons to your horror collection with the adorable little creeps of Toony Terrors, NECA's line of stylized horror icons. Standing approximately 6 inches tall from the Return of the Living Dead film, Tarman joins the Toony Terrors line. The figure comes in blister card packaging with a bonus cutout backdrop. About to curl up with your favorite bowl of Brainios. Before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Toony Terrors Return of the Living Dead Tarman, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. Now, depending on whereabouts you put the tape measure will dictate just how tall the figure stands. No, that's not a riddle. If you look at actually where his head is, then the figure's only at about 4 1/4 inches, or about 4 3/4 of an inch in height. Yet, though, if you go to the end of his fingertip being the highest point, then the figure's actually clearing past 5 inches. And that works out to be a figure then that's about 13 centimeters tall. I'm sure he's going to be disappointed to find out that the brain inside this girl's head is not the juicy variety, but here's what Tarman looks like with the earlier looked at Toony Terrors Megan. Now, the thing about it, though, is that Megan needed a display stand, and yes, she didn't come include with one. Tarman has very little problems when it comes to standing, and yet he includes a display stand with him. Might maybe just use the display stand came included with Tarman, and maybe just pretend it's a pool of oil and display it along with Megan instead. She's malfunctioning after all. Here's a character that knows a little something about resurrecting the undead. Here's what Tarman looks like with Herbert West from Reanimator. Now, Herbert West is a pretty tall Toony Terror to start off with, but it also as well drives home the idea, I feel at least, that Tarman is a little too small. First of all, I think the figure could have also been packaged as a deluxe release, something that we will be looking at with the John Kramer Saw Toony Terror in an upcoming review. He comes included with Billy the Puppet. They could have taken maybe a similar cue also to Elvira that got packed along with her couch and her pooch. Maybe he could have come included with his oil drum, maybe a brain, for example, and he should have been a lot taller. Someone that knows a little something about the afterlife, here's what the Tarman looks like with the Toony Terrors Beetlejuice, and here's what he looks like with the Camp Crystal Lake Killer, Jason Voorhees. Here's the display stand I was telling you guys about. It would be like if you were to ask a 2-year-old to draw the bat symbol. Oh, that's mean. I know a lot of talented 2-year-olds that can draw a bat symbol very well. This actual pool of oil, as you can see, has a few little lumps in there, and there's also the largest lump. That would be the thing that plugs onto the underside of Tarman's foot. Foot singular, because if you actually look at the bottom of his feet, he actually only has one foot that has the hole, and that just plugs onto the display stand. One thing I do think that NECA did right here is that we've often got Toony Terrors where they have like pre-arched feet, but they were smart enough to at least add a little bit of plastic on the back of the heel. So if you did want to have Tarman displayed really without the display stand, like I said, he stands fine. He really doesn't need this necessarily at all. But if you wanted to complete the look, this just attaches onto the bottom of his feet. It squeaks and creaks as you do that. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily give him any more stability than he had before. If anything, it kind of makes him sometimes a little bit more wobblier. But I guess if you wanted to get a continued look of the slime dripping down his leg, one thing is, I like the coloring is pretty consistent. It's not maybe as dark of a brown as he has for his pants, but it's pretty close, pretty close. Let's go ahead and just take that squeaking and creaking and just remove it altogether. Getting a closer look at Tarman, the superior Tarman from the Return of the Living Dead, not the inferior Tarman that we see only for a glimpse in Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I wasn't as big of a fan of Return of the Living Dead Part 2, even though it really did bring back actors from the original film and just pretended like they were completely different characters altogether. Tarman, though, the OG Tarman is where it's at. The head sculpt on this guy is fantastic. Not that I would imagine the Mystery Incorporated ever really running into this guy. This guy would be pretty scary in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, but he works really well as a candidate for Toony Terrors. Still, though, I feel like the figure is way too small. Taking maybe even just the size of his head and adding that size on top of it, I think the figure could have been right around here and released him as a deluxe release. Being the fact he only really has the plastic being dedicated to a display stand and a display stand only, you look at his hand, for example, and you'd swear that that's a suitable hand for holding a big, juicy, squishy brain. I got to fit in his hand really rather nicely. And hey, again, the figure could have also come included with a little oil drum. Maybe that might be something that we see with a future release. I mean, it's not the first time we would have seen a Toony Terror get a double dip. Elvira, speaking of which earlier, did get a singular release. She did also get that packaged deluxe release that came included with both the couch and her dog. Maybe we might get something similar here for the Tarman. Tarman, though, is a nice looking figure. I really like the coloring that they've done here. Of course, the very large beady eyes that he has, screaming brains down in the bottom of the basement. I really like the coloring of the blue that they've used here. The coloring for his face overall is a very nice dark chocolate brown. You've got the nice lighter coloring of brown there on the top of his head there as well. He has these long draped pieces of plastic coming down from the tops of his sleeves. Now, unfortunately, though, he is pre-posed, which usually goes with the territory of Toony tears. You always really have, like, these figures are kind of in a way that, even though there is really a hinge, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's not like you're going to be bringing his arm down like that. It's defying the laws of gravity. So even though there is a swivelable hinge right there in the shoulder, you're always pretty much going to have Tarman in a pose like this. Now, he doesn't have either symmetrical articulation. He actually has more articulation on this side of the figure's body than on this side. Before we actually get down to the posability, though, on the character, I did also want to show you guys, first of all, I love the way they've done the rib cage. The rib cage, as well as the rest of the arms and his limbs, for example, are a nice kind of creamish beige color. And you've got all these little splotches of oil slicked black all across that as well. It's kind of more of a darker brown. I love the color, the way they've sculpted the legs. Just this trickling, it just looks like a melted candle. Now, this is all softer plastic. Funny, though, that his arms actually are a little bit softer of a plastic, too. So not that they've used a gummier plastic, but he definitely feels like he's a little bit softer than maybe some of the Toony tears we've gotten before. And that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. Just love the way they've sculpted the drapings here, what's little left of his clothing. Love the way they've ripped it away on the back of the figure's body there as well. And just, again, the sculpting is some of the best I've seen from Toony tears. Big fan, maybe a little biased also to the fact that we actually get ourselves a Tarman. The first and only introduction I think we've gotten of a Tarman of a NECA release. I'm hoping that this is also going to be a tease for a future figure that down the road, maybe we get a retro cloth release figure this, or maybe we'll be having this discussion a little bit later with an ultimate release Tarman. I can't wait if that's the case. Now, for the figure's articulation, he only has generally for, well, not all across the board, but Toony tears tend to have like 5 points of articulation. Tarman has a ball joint here in his head, so the head looks down pretty good. You can move it up, down, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. So he's brains. Because his shoulder is as high as it is, he can at least clear the shoulder, but you'll feel like the bottom of his chin, for example, is going to be rubbing against the top of the shoulder. So you don't really want to be doing that in case it happens to start flaking the paint at the bottom of it. The head does, like I said, have pretty decent posability overall. The limitations become a little bit more apparent when you get to the shoulders. Now, the shoulders are only going to be on straight swivels, so you can move this one all the way around. You can also move this one all the way around, but again, based on the way he's designed, unless it looks like he's falling down, maybe like he being Tarman 2, for example, in Return of the Living Dead Part 2, where I guess he's falling, what is it, like a sewer pipe he falls off the end into the waterway? I guess if he was falling, then it would make more sense to have the arm this way. But obviously, you're going to want to have the arm this way. There's no articulation here for the wrist, on this side at least. However, on this side, you can rotate the wrist all the way around. So again, like if you had given him, for example, an accessory of a juicy brain, the brain could have sat very nicely in this hand here. From that point down, there's no articulation. There's nothing at all you can really do with Tarman, and that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. I mean, with the sell of the Toony tears, for me at least, the appeal of Toony tears has always been the fact that these characters look like they were cartoon versions of some of your favorite horror icons. I think, though, Tarman lends really well to the idea of a Toony tear release. And again, like if to slide this guy over, bring in Megan, it's just really interesting to see that we have two completely different characters from two completely different decades, really, of horror films. We've got something more modern here with Megan. We got something a little bit more retro here with Tarman. Really nice looking release figures from the folks over at NECA Toys. Now, again, the only thing I would say, though, from Tarman, I mean, especially if to just even compare him with Jason Voorhees, just to bring him in as a comparison. I mean, look how small Tarman is. Tarman really should have been a lot taller than what he actually was, even at the very least, if they had made him the same size as Jason Voorhees. All this, again, hopeful thinking on my part that maybe down the road, we might get ourselves a deluxe release of Tarman. Give him the juicy brain that he always really needed right from day one. This guy keeps asking for brains after all. Maybe get this guy released where he could come include with also his oil drum. I think that that's something that probably they're going to plan to do. I mean, they've already double dipped really an Elvira figure. Wouldn't be that far removed to think that they could also double dip the idea of giving us a Tarman. Give us a Tarman that comes included with a little oil canister. Yes, please. I almost feel as if the display stand that got packed along with Tarman is more there for visual appeal than practical purpose. Because if you look at the back of his arched foot, we have gotten figures with pre-poses or arched feet before, and usually, yes, they've required display stand. But what's rather interesting on the back of Tarman's ankle is if you look at it, there's that little lip of additional plastic that NECA put in there that, if for the figure to stand on his own without it, makes me think that the display stand is actually more there just to have a little pool of oil settling on the bottom of his leg. That's not a bad thing at all. It just gives him a little bit more stuff to look at when you're looking at him on the shelf. He already has a lot of stuff to look at. Even though he is a little bit limited in articulation, instead of having more of the traditionally 5 points of articulation, this guy only has 2 in the shoulders, 1 in the hand, 1 in the head. So he's actually missing 1, but he more than makes up for it with some stellar looking sculpting. I do hope, again, like this guy gets a deluxe treatment, maybe giving this guy like an oil drum, for example, that we see in the movie. Or, hey, why not? This could also be perhaps a tease on NECA's part for what they potentially have in store for us Return of the Living Dead fans. Maybe, you never know, a retro cloth, or even, dare I say, an ultimate release Tarman down the road. Let's hope that that's the case. But what do you guys think, though, of the Toony Terrors Tarman? Have you had the chance to pick up this one for yourself? And what do you guys think of a Return of the Living Dead Tarman? Do you like the Tarman from the first film? Am I even going to bother to ask this? Do you like the Tarman from the first film, or you prefer Tarman from the Return of the Living Dead Part 2? Nobody likes Tarman from Return of the Living Dead Part 2. But in the meantime, guys, if you are interested to get Tarman for yourself, he should be available right now in retail stores and online. I ordered this guy along with the Megan. We're also going to be looking at the Fiend, Toony Terror release of that one, and we're also going to be looking at Vincent Price. So lots of Toony Terror reviews coming your way. The key to make sure that you're not going to be missing out on any upcoming videos. Yes, hit that subscribe button down below. Yes, turn on the bell notification. Yes. Sorry, we never finished that last part. Oh, yes. Yes, come back. Make sure you're coming back on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.